Imagine discovering that the most powerful man on earth tried to resurrect his dead empress by mutilating a teenage boy into her likeness. That single, chilling secret rewrote Rome's nightmares forever. Picture this. You're wandering the sun-splashed Forum of Rome in the spring of 67 AD when the crowd suddenly parts. The Emperor Nero glides past, clothed in imperial purple, a radiant bride on his arm. Gasps follow in their wake, because every onlooker knows the unspeakable truth. The woman beside the ruler of 60 million souls was once a boy named Sporus. What Nero did to him still stands among history's most shocking acts of psychological and physical domination. Before we unspool this descent into obsession and despair, a quick invitation. If stories like these ignite your curiosity, strike the like button, subscribe for more hidden histories, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. Across continents and centuries, we're connected by the same desire to understand how power can warp humanity. What you're about to hear isn't merely another tale of Roman extravagance. It is the story of how absolute authority can twist love into fixation, grief into madness, and a living person into a walking reliquary for one man's fantasies. The name Sporus may be unfamiliar, but his tragedy will linger long after the final word. Let's begin with the architect of this nightmare. Nero didn't enter the world evil. When he ascended the throne at 16, many Romans dared to hope they were witnessing a new golden age. He lowered taxes, funded public games, and even entertained the masses by performing on stage himself. Yet absolute power corrodes the soul like seawater on bronze, and by 65 AD, something deep inside the emperor had splintered. Perhaps it was the paranoia of knowing every senator coveted his title. Perhaps it was the loneliness of an existence where no one could ever say no. Or perhaps it was the fate of the one person he claimed to love beyond life, Poppaea Sabina. Poppaea embodied everything Nero craved: beauty that silenced rooms, political acumen sharp as a legionary's gladius, and ambition that mirrored his own grand dreams. Nero was already wed to Octavia, the dignified daughter of the previous emperor, but that union had all the warmth of marble. Poppaea, by contrast, was laughter at midnight and schemes at dawn. Where Octavia was self-effacing, Poppaea commanded the spotlight. Where Octavia avoided scandal, Poppaea danced in it like flames. What began as a courtly affair soon erupted into a dangerous infatuation that left even Nero's closest advisors trembling. Ancient chroniclers paint Nero during these years as a man unhinged. He erupted in fury if another man's gaze lingered on Poppaea. He stationed guards around her, ostensibly for her safety, but truly to police every conversation. Gifts flowed like wine at Saturnalia: pearls from the Red Sea, silks from far Cathay, perfumes from Arabia. Then reality itself bent under his desire. He divorced Octavia and staged a wedding for Poppaea of such splendor that veteran senators muttered of divine hubris. Marriage only tightened Nero's grip. He isolated his new empress, surrounding her with sycophants whose fortunes depended on his favor. Portraits and statues of Poppaea multiplied throughout the palace, and Nero would spend hours simply watching her breathe. This was not devotion, it was ownership. Poppaea knew the perilous game she played. She cultivated allies, advanced her clan's fortunes, and, crucially, refused to cower. She argued policy, mocked Nero's artistic pretensions, even criticized his singing when pitch wavered. The fatal quarrel came in 65 AD. Sources disagree on the spark. Some blame Nero's endless chariot races, others his nocturnal theatre debuts, but all agree on the outcome. Poppaea, heavy with their second child, reproached Nero for valuing applause more than duty. In a sudden storm of rage, he kicked or struck her abdomen. Whether one blow or many, the force shattered more than bones. As her life ebbed on polished marble, Nero the all-powerful fell to his knees, begging forgiveness and commanding her to live, as though imperial edicts could halt death. Physicians rushed in, offered fortunes or faced torture, but Poppaea died within hours. The unborn heir died with her. Something inside Nero cracked beyond repair. He refused the customary cremation, embalmed her body in spices fit for a pharaoh, and ensconced her in a tomb richer than any predecessors. He proclaimed her a goddess, founded a cult in her honour, and spent nights conversing with her corpse. Courtiers had to pretend she still lived, speaking of her in the present tense and leaving her couch empty at banquets. Anyone urging the emperor to move on found himself exiled, or dispatched to darker fates. Into this hall of mirrors walked Sporus. Barely 14 or 15, he was a freed slave raised within the palace, educated for clerical duties, privileged yet utterly dependent on imperial whim. His quiet intelligence was not what caught Nero's eye, it was his face. Multiple writers note the boy's startling resemblance to Poppaea, especially in the eyes and the fragile curve of his cheekbones. In an age that read spiritual truths in physical likeness, the effect was almost supernatural. When Nero first saw Sporus, he must have believed the gods handed him a chance to undo the irreversible. Only one obstacle intruded. Sporus was male. Yet for an emperor who had argued with a corpse and expected replies, reshaping flesh seemed a trivial problem. The cruelty that followed still appalls. Nero summoned Rome's finest physicians and ordered irreversible surgery to feminize the boy. Ancient operating theatres were places of bone-saw screams and crude, cauterizing irons. Survival alone was a razor-thin miracle. Weeks of feverish recovery ensued, during which Sporus's future was stitched shut like the wounds on his body. When he could stand, Nero announced a new imperial wedding. The boy received Poppaea's own surname, Sabina, and was moved to special quarters, where tailors, jewelers, and cosmeticians erased the last traces of his former self. Gowns were cut to flatter a frame never meant for them. Rubies that once adorned Poppaea's throat now pinned veils over Sporus's newly shorn hair. Tutors drilled him in how to walk, sit, and laugh like a woman. Voice coaches coaxed higher tones from a still-breaking voice. Each lesson was a dagger to identity, each ornament a golden shackle. The ceremony unfolded that spring beneath ceilings draped with imported roses and torches numbering in the thousands. Guests performed their roles with masks of joy, though horror prowled behind their eyes. Hand in hand, the emperor and his artificial bride exchanged vows, broke sacred bread, and signed parchments that made fiction law. From that night forward, Sporus lived as empress. Luxury chained him as surely as iron. He gained a retinue, a litter, silken chambers, but every mirror reflected Poppaea's ghost. Nero addressed him by the dead woman's name, reminisced about memories that never belonged to Sporus, and expected flawless replies. The price of a single misstep could be fatal, so Sporus learned to anticipate Nero's every mood, becoming the perfect marionette. Yet witnesses noted that behind flawless manners his eyes grew hollow, his laughter slow and distant. For 2 years this grotesque theatre continued, culminating in Nero's grand artistic tour of Greece. The emperor fancied himself a world-class performer and dragged his court, Sporus included, across the Aegean to collect prizes at ancient festivals. Imagine dignitaries of Athens bowing to a teenage boy in bridal silk, forced to pretend the illusion was real. But Nero's excesses finally ignited rebellion. In early 68 AD, provincial legions rose, the Praetorian Guard defected, and the Senate branded him an enemy of Rome. Nero fled the city with a handful of loyalists, Sporus among them, and hid in a suburban villa. There, between frantic escape schemes and rehearsals for a noble suicide, Nero clutched his ersatz empress like a talisman. When horsemen closed in, he chose death over capture, assisted by a freedman's trembling hand.